We're on the same
When I
side.
woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
One about the past and one about the future.
What's up? It's Draftvice. It's me. It's Walter. It's just me today. Corona Crisis Edition. Quarantine down. If you noticed previously, I've had other people on the podcast, even as we got into a little bit more of this crisis, but I was not feeling well, and I did not want to run the risk of getting anybody else sick. And since this podcast slash show slash banana does not happen without me running it, unfortunately, I have to do it on my own at this point because I don't want to get anybody else sick. So hopefully I don't have the COVID. Even if I do, hopefully I didn't give it to anybody. But let's keep going. All right. Welcome to Draftvice. I hear it's a very crazy world out there, and but it's also been a crazy world with the NFL and free agency and football. And if you want, you can follow the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at Brojo Death Punch on Instagram, Twitter, Twitch. You could friend me on Xbox Live if you really want. So anyway, we are here. Dude, it feels like it's been forever. So much stuff has gone on since I last spoke to everybody. I was recovering from not feeling very well, and I was not up to doing a podcast up until now. So, right off the bat, a couple of things that happened. 2 running backs got signed, but one of them, the craziness of it all. Todd Gurley released by the Rams, and then 5 minutes later, signed by the Falcons. Wow, that was quick. Not only that, but the Falcons, the whole deal was great for the Falcons. At $5 million, we're getting Todd Gurley. I remember this guy was the rushing leader at one point. And now all of a sudden they get Todd freaking Gurley. That's great for them. And not only that, but Todd Gurley's getting paid by the Rams and the Falcons. Dude, that's dope. So there you go. Right off the bat, great deal for him. He gets to go home to Georgia. He played in Georgia. He's a Georgia college guy. That's where he went. And then, he got released by the LA Rams, who now look like they're in kind of like a weird shuffle mode. So that was Todd Gurley and his 5 minutes of crazy. Then we had Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon signed with the Denver Broncos. Everybody, the Denver Broncos. They're probably going to get rid of that Royce Freeman guy. Maybe keep Philip Lindsay to be the Austin Eckler to Melvin Gordon's Melvin Gordon. Dude, this team's going to be crazy this year. I mean, I don't know. It's a weird thing. So both these guys have a lot of fantasy implications, right? And we're not really touching on fantasy right now, although I think we should do a fantasy episode, as we get closer, kind of looking at the real effects of all these moves and what we think about all of them. But for right now, these two guys are big fantasy movers, right? Melvin Gordon, I think he's probably behind a better offensive line than he was the last couple of years, right? You got a better offensive line coach in Munchak. It seems like the Broncos are making maneuvers. I don't know if his quarterback's definitely not better, but we've seen a lot from Melvin Gordon. And I don't think everything's done with Todd Gurley, and there's a lot to think that I know the Falcons had a weird offensive line last year, but they still had a lot of good pieces. They had a couple of guys who were on rookie deals who were their first years in the NFL. And we know the first year in the NFL for offensive linemen tends to be very slow time, especially for guys who are not considered the top end echelon of guys, outside of the Mike McGlincheys and the Quentin Nelsons and the Ryan Ramczyks. Usually your first year in the NFL as an offensive lineman, not always Laramie Tunsil took a couple of years to catch up to speed. So maybe we will see a step forward from this Falcons offensive line, way more than we would expect from, say, maybe the LA Rams offensive line. So I think this is a good setup. They're replacing a higher contract Devontae Freeman with a lower contract Todd Gurley, and not only that, the LA Rams are paying for it. Yeah, exactly, right? This is Atlanta and LA are the U.S. and Mexico with that wall thing, except the reality version of it. So anyway, Todd Gurley, I could see maybe a bounce back in fantasy. Uh, I know some people, will always have questions with the injury, and yeah, I still have questions with the injury too. When's it going to end up taking him out of the game? When's it, is it going to be? And I mean that both figurative, like as in an actual individual game, and also in the long run. So with Todd Gurley, I do worry about it, but I'm not. I think he's not going to be a first round pick in fantasy, right? But maybe a second rounder. Yeah, I could see a second rounder. A better offensive line. I kind of think Matt Ryan is a better quarterback than Jared Goff. If anything, they very much match up to each other. Um, I know. I like what might be situated there for those running backs. Melvin Gordon's a guy in my heart, but I don't. I think that it's still out on Drew Lock. We only saw him for 5 games. I think there's a lot of things to like about him, but I think we got to keep an eye on what's going to go on with that offense, with the pieces around Drew Lock, if you will. So those are right off the bat because those are like the biggest story, affect fantasy, affect just those were kind of big names too. But there was also actually right as I was getting on here, the Colts signed Xavier Rhodes, former cornerback of the Minnesota Vikings. Colts are doing a lot, everybody. I mean, they signed to a 1-year deal. I think this is a way to be like, hey, listen, we're on our way to the playoffs. We think, anyway. We got Phillip Rivers. We got this DeForest Buckner guy. Come on, we got rid of Pierre Desir, right? That's the other thing. Before they even signed Rhodes, they cut Pierre Desir, who was their corner, like one of their starting corners last year. Took a little bit of a downturn, but there was questions as to whether he was injured. He, by the way, signed with the Jets, and we're going to talk about the Jets in a little bit because they did a couple of moves. So I talked about some of them probably previously, but just because they have a couple of more moves, a couple of things we were hinting towards to the future. In fact, let's go into it right now. After the Rhodes, good bounce back opportunity. He'll be a free agent next year. That means, so if he proves himself very well, maybe he gets a bigger deal later on. Maybe with the Colts, maybe somewhere else. It's not unreasonable to think that there could be a bounce back here. So, we'll get to see if maybe Xavier Rhodes looks again more like Patrick Peterson than, I don't know, Tremaine Johnson. So, who, by the way, was cut. I think, again, we went over that previously. So, we were talking before about the Jets. Jets signed Pierre Desir. Jets also signed Brashad Perriman. Now you might be like, wait, Brashad Perriman, what happened to Robbie Anderson? Well, I think we all know Robbie Anderson, now a former Temple guy, decided to go join up with Matt Rule, another guy from Temple, over in Carolina. Yeah, Robbie Anderson in Carolina. I think that's going to be an interesting setup. I don't know what they're doing in Carolina, but with Robbie Anderson being a speed threat, I think if they keep Curtis Samuel, I honestly think that's a lot of speed to have on that offense. Now the big question is, does Bridgewater have the arm to really make you feel threatened by all that speed on the outside, that it'll clear up some space for DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey? But dude, that's a lot of weapons. I like what they have on offense down there. If they finally find a quarterback that's not Bridgewater, that could take a real, now not for nothing, I think you will see some opportunity there with Robbie Anderson. He can utilize the intermediate areas of the field pretty well. So I don't like, he's not just a deep threat. So I think you might see some more usage of him and DJ Moore than, say, Curtis Samuel. And I don't know, maybe Curtis Samuel's on the trade block. It doesn't sound like it yet, but he could be. And I mean, honestly, I'm a team might be looking at that being like, yeah, I see you guys are, you got that speed threat over there, Curtis Samuel. Now, he's more athlete necessarily than receiver, but he still showed some chops. So I'd be interested in seeing where he lands or where he goes if I'm a team that needs a receiver to go after him. Before, again, I'm going to jump back to the Jets. The Jets saw this move, lost out to Robbie Anderson, who signed a 2-year, $20 million deal, $12 million in the first year of the deal. And they said, you know what? We're not matching that. We're going to go with a guy who's very similar. We're going to go with Brashad Perriman, former first-round pick of the Ravens, was on the Browns and was on the Bucks. Now he's on the Jets. 1-year deal again. And that seems to be what they're kind of going with here with the Jets. They're kind of like in this wait and see mode. Them and the Browns seem to be doing. Now they've been doing it on different parts of their teams, but the Jets here signed Brashad Perriman to a 1-year deal. It sounds like they signed another offensive lineman, Van Roten, formerly of the Carolina Panthers. So they're starting to build up the interior up a little bit. They still haven't found a tackle that'll fit them, other than George Fant, who not sure I really feel comfortable with George Fant as a tackle. But listen, you know what? It seems like they are trying to test things out, right? Get the waters cleared up. Brashad Perriman's deal is a little bit cheaper than Robbie Anderson, which might make sense. Like, hey, we don't know really where we're going in the future. Let's go with a guy who we can get who's very similar to Anderson. Maybe we could pay him a little bit further down the line. But this year we'll go with like a $6 million deal with $8 million, up to $8 million in incentives. Yeah, we'll go with this Brashad Perriman guy. And listen, Brashad Perriman's not bad. I mean, honestly, he's probably a bulkier version of Robbie Anderson. But I've seen Robbie Anderson show up more. I always feel more comfortable with the guy you know than the guy you don't know. That's my personal opinion on it. I'd rather take the receiver who, like, we've seen this before. We've seen teams go like, listen, we're losing A, we'll get a similar guy in B, and it doesn't work out because the chemistry's not there. The band isn't together, and we're not used to this. And it's, hey, this guy's not the same guy. Brashad Perriman has dealt with drop issues in the past, especially now. Granted, I would honestly argue when he was in Baltimore, some of those issues were with location. Joe Flacco was not necessarily the best quarterback in the world when he was throwing the ball to Brashad Perriman. That was when Flacco started his drop-off journey. So, but before we get into other bits, there was a big trade, right? Since we were last on this podcast, right? And we've been talking about all these trades recently. The Darius Slay trade, man. We were talking potentially he might get traded. Got traded to the Eagles for a third and a fourth rounder. Third and a fifth rounder, sorry. Eagles have been making a lot of deals after like the main spike of free agency, right? They released Malcolm Jenkins. We talked about that. They trade for Darius Slay from the Detroit Lions. They signed Will Parks and Nickel Roby-Coleman and Jatavius Brown. Some guys to fill in some spots. Nickel Roby-Coleman, man, like great slot corner. Now they're really filling out the secondary, right? They said, listen, we were weak on the back end. We've been weak on the back end. We got to fix this. All right, we'll trade for Slay. Get one side fixed. All right, good. They re-signed Jalen Mills. All right, he's been okay. Nickel Roby-Coleman, great slot corner. And then Will Parks, who was doing pretty well in Denver as a safety. So it seems like they are trying to fix their coverage unit here. Jatavius Brown, linebacker, kind of, again, fill out some of the spots there. They re-signed McLeod. Not Connor McLeod, not the guy from the There Can Only Be One. Not those movies, but the safety. They re-signed the safety along with Jalen Mills. They released Malcolm Jenkins, who we talked about, signed with the Saints. And I think we talked about this. They also agreed to terms with Javon Hargrave, mentioned previously. I think they are really trying to make sure their defense doesn't lose games for them. We've seen this before with that team. Now it looks like they're building up more pieces around that defense. Make sure their coverage unit does not lose them games, which makes sense. If you are, if you have this playoff caliber team and you need something, and you're finding guys from good deals. Yeah, and not only that, they signed Slay to an extension with that trade, right? So I think it was a good deal. I think it was smart on the Eagles spot to go ahead and get that. It doesn't sound like they were, now what do they need? They need receiver help, right? Now you got some opportunity in the draft to get a receiver. There's still some guys out there for some deals, so you never know. Like maybe as you get closer to the draft or out of the bulk of free agency, they start picking up other guys who really haven't signed anywhere yet. So they're also rumored to be shopping Rasul Douglas. I could see a couple of teams being interested in him. The I was going to say the Bills, but the Bills just signed E.J. Gaines. They got Josh Norman. They seem to be the Bills seem to focus on their guys, right? But I feel like Rasul Douglas would have been a good fit there. Potentially maybe the Washington team down over in D.C., who made a couple of their moves, including trading for Kyle Allen. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. They traded a fifth-rounder for him. They also traded Quentin Dunbar, their corner, for a fifth-rounder over to the Seahawks. He's actually a pretty good corner. He fits kind of what the Seahawks are looking to do with their cover 3 scheme. And it seems like the Washington team is kind of looking to do it. They're looking to formulate around what they want to do. We want to do what we want to do. We're going to get rid of the guys who don't fit what we want to do, which we've seen a lot of times with a lot of new coaches and new schemes and new personnel. They push some guys out. They get some new guys in, guys who match up what they want to do. So, also, that Kyle Allen guy, they traded for him from the Panthers. Somebody else got released from the Panthers, the one, the only, the Cam Newton, right? 2015 Cam Newton was amazing, right? That's all we ever hear. I loved, dude, I had him in fantasy, man. That was gold. He was Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson before Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. So, and he did that with not a lot around him. So, now Cam Newton's a free agent. The Panthers released him after their little bit of a fiasco. Who knows what team he's going to go to? He seems to be in fight mode. He's all right, yo, I'm on this, man. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna kick some butt. I'm gonna be a quarterback again. Don't worry about it. I think he'll bounce back. At least one more season he will have back in the NFL. And he will. I don't know if it'll be as great as 2015, but I do think eventually he will be back. I don't know what team necessarily he fit. I think the best team for him would be the Chargers. They so far have announced that they are not looking to sign anybody. They are not looking to trade for anybody. Now maybe that was kind of a bluff to be hey, yo, we're not gonna trade you for no Cam Newton. We're just gonna go ahead and stick with the Tyrod Taylor. And then maybe he goes ahead and signs them. Or they just draft somebody, which is what it's sounding like. But we will see. Jaguars. Oh, that was the other. Dude, a lot of trades, man. A lot of trades. Jaguars traded Nick Foles. Yep. For a conditional 4th-round pick. To the Bears. To the Bears, everybody. That was what I did not expect that to be the one. Now, it kind of makes sense. Matt Nagy knows Nick Foles. They know Andy Reid. They all go back. They go yo, let's go do this. And listen, I don't think it was a horrible trade on part of I think it was a great trade on part of the Jaguars. It's a weird trade on part of the Bears just because there's other options out there that I thought were maybe a bit better fits than Nick Foles. And Nick Foles really hasn't been all that great as a starter. He's been good at coming in when you need him. He's been a high-level backup. Now, they also trade for him with the whole contract, everybody. Now, that's crazy. But now they can kind of look to Trubisky and be listen, we're paying the money because this is what he agreed to, right? So, I don't know. I'm not a huge Nick Foles fan. I'm not a huge Trubisky fan, so I'm kind of looking at the Bears okay, see you later, sunshine. So yeah, by the way, the Bears seem to be doing some weird moves. They signed a couple of ex-first-round picks in Artie Burns and Barkevious Mingo, and Jermaine Ifedi. Yeah, because they needed to fix up their O-line. They lost a couple of guys. They lost somebody to retirement, Mr. Long, if you will. And now they're going to be, they're a little short on offensive linemen, so they went with the former Seahawk Jermaine Ifedi. Barkevious Mingo has been okay as a pass rusher in recent years. Really only the Seahawks have ever gotten anything out of Barkevious Mingo. Everybody else, whether you're the Browns or the Texans or anybody else, just doesn't seem to get anything out of Barkevious. Do love the name, though, Barkevious Mingo. That's going to be my my nom de plume one day. And then Artie Burns just never seemed to fit in with what the Steelers wanted to do. And honestly, scheme-wise, he never seemed to fit in with what the Steelers wanted to do. He was not the Steelers are in so much zone, and then not that Artie Burns was even that successful in his own right, but he's definitely more of a man corner. So we'll see if he bounces a little bit better in Chicago, but we will. I don't know. We will see. We already talked about the Panthers signing Robbie Anderson and releasing Cam Newton. We talked a little bit about the Jets signing Pierre Desir, Brashad Perriman losing out on Robbie Anderson, bringing in Van Roten. Some other wide receiver news: Travis Benjamin went to the 49ers. Philip Dorsett went to the Seahawks. That's going to be a very fast receiving core, right? Everybody in that receiving core seems to run a 4.3. So, dude, DK Metcalf, Philip Dorsett, and Tyler Lockett. Man, that's a lot of speed. That's a lot. That's a lot of speed, Walter. They're just going to be throwing deep balls, which I kind of like that, though. Like, when you have a lot of speed on the offensive side, maybe kind of opens up for the running. And not only that, you got probably one of the best deep ball throwers and off-script guys in the NFL, Russell Wilson. So, the Bucs re-signed Ndamukong Suh. Dallas agreed to terms with HaHa Clinton-Dix. Travis Frederick retired, man. What are the Dallas Cowboys going to do with Travis Frederick? Center Travis Frederick. Man, that you could tell the difference between that offensive line with Travis Frederick and without Travis Frederick. Now they have time. They can go ahead and fix it. He was so good. Even last year, he played really well. But listen, he's dealt with some medical issues. I think the Cowboys and him kind of saw this coming. He was a great All-Pro center. He played so well last year that you could see the difference. Like the amount of pressures on Dak Prescott went down immensely when he was in that game. And he was in for this full season compared to 2018 where it was just not very good. They still have a couple of guys. They have Connor McGovern, different Connor McGovern than the one the Jets signed, clearly. A guy who they drafted a couple of years ago. They also have Joe Looney. So we will see if they can kind of fix up this offensive line. They signed a bunch of guys to long contracts to on all the other spots of this O-line. So maybe that should help cover up a couple of issues. But I'd be a little worried for the Dallas team, but the Cowboys, I mean, they're still going to be about running the ball. They still got a lot of good O-linemen. They still got Dak Prescott, who's on the franchise tag now. They signed Amari Cooper, I think last time we talked about it, to a $20 million a year deal, $100 million total. But, yeah, and then they also come to an agreement with Dontari Poe, D-tackle, which kind of makes sense. Like, the Cowboys needed some interior D-line depth to fill out that roster. They probably still need an edge presence. We'll get to the Cowboys eventually. I want to try and find a Cowboys fan. Maybe if I can get people on during the apocalypse, this Corona crisis. But if not, don't worry about it. We will talk about the Cowboys. Browns, I'd be remiss if I didn't do any Browns news. Browns did a lot of stuff the last couple of this last week. A lot of one-year deals. Andrew Billings, Andrew Sendejo, a lot of Andrews, Carl Joseph, safety from the Raiders, who was a first-round pick. A lot of these guys are former first-round picks. You'll notice they signed to deals as Carl Joseph, Kevin Johnson. There was somebody else. Maybe I guess I'm thinking of Jack Conklin, yeah. But anyway, yeah, they signed Carl Joseph to a one-year deal, Andrew Sendejo to a one-year deal, Andrew Billings, D-tackle from the Cincinnati Bengals, to a one-year deal. A lot of pieces that they're trying to they signed a lot of long-term deals on the offense, and they decided to go hey, let's go bargain bin shopping, 1 year rentals on defense, because we have defensive pieces already. Let's go ahead and add to it, but let's not overload it. So Kevin Johnson has played pretty well in some opportunity. He might compete with Greedy Williams on the outside, big guy. He also has had time in the slot. He's played pretty well there. Just to fill out the cornerbacks on the roster. I think that's a good move. They definitely needed to go ahead and work on trying to find pieces to add to this defense that were on cheap deals. And this is a great idea. Again, Carl Joseph, another guy who played really well, hard-hitting safety, really good in run defense. If you're running a 4-2-3, which we probably do. If you're I don't know necessarily what the new D coordinator is going to do, but the old D coordinator kind of ran that. Great guy to have for that. He's played really well when he's played. Now, he hasn't always been healthy. Andrew Billings is on a 1-year deal. He's played really well at nose tackle, so you'll give Ogunjobi a chance to rest or be able to pair him up with Ogunjobi or pair him up with Sheldon Richardson and rotate guys, and that's a good interior to have. It sounds like the Browns are moving towards this idea of, hey, let's go ahead and get about. Also, if they all walk, you get and they get bigger deals next year. Yeah, you get compensatory picks. This is a good lottery maneuver. I like this move. They signed B.J. Goodson. They traded for Andy Janovich, who's a fullback. And then they also got Chris Hubbard to agree to a deal, right? They had a tackle on their roster already, the guy who played right tackle the last 2 years, and he has not played very well. He's been probably bottom of the NFL, but he hasn't been below replacement level. So here's what I think they did. They said, hey, listen, we want to keep you as a backup. So what they did is they reworked his deal. $1 million guarantee, $2.5 million salary, and then up to $5 million in potential earnings. And if you play 90% of snaps this year, you have an opt-out clause for 2021. Probably not going to play this year because unless he's playing right guard, right tackle's being taken up by Jack Conklin, who's the big deal that they signed. So I thought that was an interesting maneuver. It gives you now you have depth and a guy who you know about already. Who, I think he was ranked 66 of 75 tackles. So if your right tackle goes down, if somebody goes down, you're not totally screwed. He's not great. He really has not played very well at all. But at least you have a spot starter who can play better than worst case scenario, right? So there is that. New England signed Brian Hoyer. I know, big deal. But Brian Hoyer might be the starter next year. Who knows? It's gonna be an interesting situation in New England with him and Jared Stidham. Steelers signed Eric Ebron. That's going to be an interesting situation. Ebron, spent the last 2 years with the Colts, then was with Detroit before that. We will see if Ben Roethlisberger can finally utilize a tight end and if Eric Ebron can be that tight end. The Raiders have been doing a lot of deals. Everybody, they keep doing these, they're kind of they're doing these, small, cheap 1-year deal or cheap contracts and just scraping up everybody. Right now, they went for Aguilar and Eric Kush, not really big names, but okay guys. They went to give Aguilar a bigger deal and he dropped it. And Eric Kush is a good interior, basically backup guy, but it plays at a high enough level when he has played. Saints signed Malcolm Jenkins, as I said before. We've already talked about that, but they also signed Emmanuel Sanders, wide receiver, previously of the Broncos, the Steelers, and, of course, the Super Bowl contender, San Francisco 49ers. They signed Emmanuel Sanders to his 2-year deal. And by the way, we are talking about the Saints in depth today, everybody. Because, listen, I kind of like what they've been doing. We want to get to this 2020 outlook kind of deal. We didn't get to them before free agency, but we are going to talk a little bit about them going into the draft and going into, what they've done so far in free agency, what else they might need. They signed... They re-signed Breeze to a 2-year deal. They re-signed Andreas Pete, who is one of their bigger offensive linemen, one of their bigger free agents leaving. This is a team that didn't look like it had a lot of money either. And again, they've been a playoff contender. So now it seems like they're still bulking up though. They signed Malcolm Jenkins. They signed Emmanuel Sanders. By the way, Malcolm Jenkins used to be a Saint. Then he went to the Eagles, and now he's back. They signed Emmanuel Sanders, right? Receiver. Dude, what did that team need? They needed another receiving threat outside of Michael Thomas. I think in the draft they should still go for another receiving threat, but that's just me. They They agreed to a deal with Janoris Jenkins, right? They gave him an extension so that way they can keep him because his hit this year is going to be $13 million. So they said, hey, wait a second. $13 million this year is but it's all on guarantee. We can cut you, you're done. But what we can do here, right, is we can give you a 2-year extension, right? You'll get a lot of your money. You'll get $10 million guaranteed. But let's do a 3-year deal, $27 million. So now they have Janoris Jenkins for $9 million a year, right? 3 years, $27 million, $10 million guaranteed. All the guaranteed money's in 2020, so they can cut him next year, trade him, do whatever. I kind of like this deal because now you have a guy on the other side of Lattimore. Lattimore, by the way, on his 5th-year option, they just said okay to his 5th-year option. Same thing with Ryan Ramczyk, right tackle. This is where we're going to start hearing about first-year options. A 5th-year option, for first-round rookies. Ramczyk and Marshawn Lattimore were the first ones we've heard of so far. Both have played immensely well. So, now you have a guy on the other side. You got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You got Malcolm Jenkins. It sounds like, dude, this defense is going to be fun to watch, too. They also re-signed Noah Spence, who was drafted as a pass rusher out of Tampa Bay. He said he likes it down there. He likes the team. It's very nice, uniting team. Everybody seems to be supportive. He's learned a lot from Cameron Jordan. So I'm liking what the Saints are doing this year. I still think they're a playoff contender. Doesn't matter if Tom Brady's in that division or not. They got Drew Brees. They got Michael Thomas. They got a good defense. They got unity. They got a great O-line. I mean, that's probably one of my favorite O-lines in the NFL. They got Alvin Kamara. So a lot of good pieces here, right? Going into the draft, right? Now, keep in mind, I think they are done in free agency. Unless like a couple of small deals. They got about $15 million in free cap space. That's not a lot of money. That's usually where you're like, listen, we're going to pause for right now. You know, if we can get some like backup pieces or whatever, but you got to still sign your guys from the draft, and you also go ahead and, keep some money for like a rainy day in case you need to go ahead and be like, hey, we got to sign somebody. So, they got $15 million. I think they're basically done in free agency. I think what they might want to look at doing with this, with their draft is maybe focus on some ancillary pieces, right? They got a relatively low first-round pick. They don't have a second-round pick because they traded that to the Miami Dolphins last year so that they can go ahead and draft a center, which great because he's been a great replacement for Max Unger. They do have a 3rd-round pick, and they got a 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick. They only have 5 picks in this draft, but they've been very good at utilizing what picks they have. A lot of teams don't hit on all their picks. The Saints have been very good when they've had picks. They've really hit on them. They went right for guys who are just good. Apparently, it's just a good structured team, and they know what they can get out of guys. Like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's been really good for them from last year. The center that they drafted last year, whose name is escaping me, he played really well. They, even from the draft class from a couple of years ago, Alvin Kamara, Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, this is a team that is building to be a playoff caliber team, and they have been targeting quantity, not quality. Quality, not quantity, which sometimes, you could do both, but they've been very good with it. They've been targeted. They've gotten a lot of guys that they wanted. I think in the draft, they might want to still target another receiver. Emmanuel Sanders is a little bit on the elder side, if you will, for an NFL player, but I still like what he can bring to that offense. Maybe you get a guy. Now, they're not going to get one of the top receivers unless they trade up, which I don't see them doing, but who knows? They could go running back in this draft. There's still a lot of good, maybe in the 3rd round, especially because, you're going to get Alvin Kamara towards the end of his deal. You're kind of hitting the last legs of some of these, for Alvin Kamara. So maybe, in the 3rd round, get like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I always throw his name out there because I feel like he's going to be like the last one that you can grab as a good opportunity. But who knows? Like I say that, and then he might go the highest everybody. So I I like what the Saints have. I like what they're doing. They could maybe use a linebacker. A couple of, if they use their first round pick, Eric Murray might still be there when they draft. Patrick Queen of LSU. Isaiah Simmons will not be there. But they could also go for corner, but it sounds like they're pretty well set at corner. They might trade down, accumulate picks, but that's not really been the Saints' style. The Saints have been the ones that kind of like, they've been doing the opposite of the trade back thing. They're like, listen, we don't care. We'll trade up and grab somebody that we really like. That's just been their MO. They feel like that's a team that, like, I can't pick a piece that I really feel all that worried about. But I do feel like linebacker might, but they've gotten good play out of Demario Davis and Eric and Anzalone. Tight end, they got Jared Cook, and they've gotten good play out of him. I think really their biggest weaknesses maybe like, get a couple of other small like ancillary pieces or just depth. Again, maybe another receiver, good receiver draft, right? They won't get one of the top 3 guys, but maybe they'll get some guys in the later rounds in this draft. You can never go wrong with defensive back. Pass rusher's not a good thing this year in this draft, so I just don't see that being a thing that they're going to go after. D tackle, it depends. Like who's going to be there. I don't think Javon Kinlaw and Derek Brown's going to make it down that far. So I doubt that's going to be the option. And then if those guys aren't there, are you going to really trade down and maybe get Jordan Elliott in the second round, or is he going to fall to the third? There's a lot to like about this Saints team. The other option, the one thing that everybody's probably thinking about, quarterback, right? Do they draft one? Do they draft one in the first round? Do they trade up to draft one, like a Jordan Love? Do they draft Jalen Hurts? Those are guys who I'd be interested in if I'm a Saints fan, is kind of checking in on those guys. Or Jake Fromm. Guys who maybe fall to the second or third round in this draft. You can go like, you know what? Like, maybe we could turn something into, like, with Jalen Hurts, like, especially because we're almost at the end of with Breeze's rope here. Maybe we got to go ahead and start filling out this roster. Maybe get a young guy so when Breeze is done, kind of do what we were doing with Bridgewater's. We have somebody to replace Breeze, because now Bridgewater's not there. I know they've been saying Taysom Hill is going to be the future, but he's not. He's not, folks. That's a lie. They are just trying to sell you on a couple of makeshift goods, if you will. So, yeah, I decided to talk about the Saints because, again, I didn't feel like there's a lot to talk about with this team. And then the other team, I feel like there's not a lot to talk about, but still wanted to mention going into 2020 is the Green Bay Packers, right? Another team I think that's essentially done in free agency. They have $12 million in cap left at this point with the top 51, so I think they're essentially done. Even without the top 50, like when you go really into their cap, it's really like they're down to $6 million. But when you look at the top 51, I think they're gonna be at the $12 million mark, because that's really how you calculate the top 51. They've got a lot of picks in this draft. They've done a lot of interesting moves, right? They had a couple of guys leave. Brian Bulaga left. Blake Martinez left. And I actually think they signed guys who at least were comparable, right? Ricky Wagner, probably not as good as Brian Bulaga, but at least a comparable guy to, kind of fit in there. Cheaper deal. You were losing Bulaga. Plus, with losing Blake Martinez and Bulaga, you're potentially getting comp picks out of it, right? Compensatory picks you get for guys signing contracts and going to other teams. So you lose these 2 guys, and now you sign 2 guys who were not necessarily free agents because they were on the end of their contract, but were released. So by signing Christian Kirksey and Ricky Wagner, which we talked about previously, you are not affecting your comp pick formula. I think we talked about that previously, but I just wanted to kind of go over it really quick. They did cut Jimmy Graham. They also, and this is news that I have not reported yet, but now we'll be talking about, is they signed Devin Funchess, or they are in talks with Devin Funchess. I actually don't think it's fully confirmed or if they've agreed to terms yet, but they are in talks with Devin Funchess. Not a guy who I'm all that excited about. The Green Bay Packers had really 2 problems last year, right? It was receiver outside of Devontae Adams, and it was basically stopping the run. right? So they probably need another defensive tackle or a defensive end to kind of. But so again, they're later in the draft. They didn't really sign any defensive tackles in free agency. I don't think they're looking at that as their big worry, stopping the run. Because they did figure out ways of slowing it down eventually. And they still have Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark's going to be good. But they did re-sign Mercedes Lewis. They re-signed safety Will Redmond, who was kind of just more their third safety. The real deal here is that the Packers got to fix their wide receiver core, and it really doesn't seem like they've done enough yet, even into free agency, to do it. I don't think they planned on it. I don't think they were like, listen, we can definitely do something in free agency with this. I think they were looking to see if they can get somebody on the cheap, maybe get Emmanuel Sanders to come in. He decided to go down to the Saints. But again, they might be looking to rework some deals. They might be saying, hey, listen, what we're going to do here is we're going to play it out in the draft. We'll see if we can get somebody. Maybe they'll trade up. Maybe they're one of those teams. They have not been a trade-up team, right? They have not. But it could be. They've typically been the trade-back team, right? We'll trade back and accumulate picks and try to build up our team with all these accumulated picks, right? Fourth-round picks, fifth-round picks, next year picks. This is how they've gotten some extra pieces in that defense, into that roster. So they've been kind of, they've been good with the pass rush, right? They made a couple of good free agent signings last year. Their running backs have been a good core for them. They've been thrown to the running backs a lot. Devontae Adams has been amazing for them. I think they will go receiver this year, I think. They have a lot of picks, though. They got, all their picks in the first 5 rounds. They also have 3 6th-round picks and 2 7th-round picks. I think they'll probably either use that to maneuver a little bit or trade out and get some picks for next year or just take shots on guys. But I don't imagine them using all of those picks. Green Bay was very much a contender last year and just got annihilated by the San Francisco 49ers. Things that the Green Bay Packers have to worry about, though, is their tackles are getting old, right? So they might want to look at tackles in this draft class, especially because their guys are getting older. They're towards the end of the first round, so they might want to look at Josh Jones, Lucas Niang, just trying to filling out that offensive line because they just don't have a lot left as far as depth goes. They drafted a guy last year, Eggleton Jenkins. I liked him. I think he's played really well. But they're still probably looking at everything going like, hey, we need offensive linemen because, again, we lost Bulaga. We're going to have to replace him. Yeah, Wagner's an option, but you don't want him being like when you lose a major stalwart at a position, you don't want just one option, right? You want more than one option to fix it. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and maybe draft a guy like a Lucas Niang, Josh Jones, if Mekhi Becton falls, because I think people might be overrating Mekhi Becton, but if he falls, potentially maybe him, because they've been very good at developing guys, even though they lost the O-line coach, Campen, who was really good at developing guys. So maybe they're going to look to draft a guy and develop him. Austin Jackson's been rumored, Ezra Cleveland's been rumored in the draft to be a potential first-rounder. So a couple of those guys they might look at. Then, again, like I said, D-tackle. Like I said, they're probably not another team that's not in that opportunity to probably draft Kinlaw or Derek Brown unless those guys fall, which you never know. And draft, a lot of people fall. Like Derwin James fell one year. So, maybe they get a Jordan Elliott in the second round. It's going to be an interesting thing to look at with this team. Or maybe they wait later and get like a nose tackle, somebody just to kind of help plug up the run a little bit, to kind of put it beside Kenny Clark, make a nice little rotation. There's some opportunity with this team as far as building out the roster going forward. I still think on offense, the number one thing is receiver, right? They've got to figure out the receiver situation. They got to kind of help out Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. There's Laviska Shenault, who might have taken a little bit of a dive because of his combine testing. like I said, I don't think they're in the run for the top 3 guys. They're not in the run for the top of a lot of positions because, again, they're towards the end of the first round. Maybe they take a shot on corner. Again, corner's been a big thing for them. They just constantly seem to take shots at defensive back. But I think given this draft class, maybe they go whatever they feel is the strongest at that position at the time. So, like I said, maybe they see somebody falling of a position that they really like a Jerry Jeudy. We saw Calvin Ridley fall a couple of years ago, later than most people thought. So maybe Jerry Jeudy has a similar kind of dissension in the first round. CeeDee Lamb, those guys, though, I imagine are going to go higher. Maybe a Van Jefferson. A lot of people have been talking about Denzel Mims, who was a combine superstar and has a lot of opportunity to really be a good player in the NFL, but you're probably not seeing true work from him year one as far as making this team better. So I think what they're looking for are guys who can help right now. They are in a very much right now mode. So Green Bay is an interesting one. I don't think they're going to take a step back, but again, they lost Bulaga. Wagner's okay. And then I like Kirksey because I remember him on the Browns, and he was good for a couple of years. He's been injured the last few years. That's why the Browns got rid of him. So he might take a step forward. And listen, he's not going to be much worse than Blake Martinez. Now you got to hope he's healthy when he's playing. Outside of that, though, there's not much to say with Green Bay. They got the best quarterback in the game. They really got to hope that their receiving core gets a little bit better. Maybe they could find another piece. Maybe a Taylor Gabriel is out there. A couple of little ancillary pieces to kind of maybe a wide receiver 2 or 3. But that's it for the Packers. It's it for the Saints. It's it for me. It's it for this for right now. Listen, you can follow the podcast on Instagram at Draftvice_football. You can follow it on Twitter at Draftvice. You can follow me at Brojo Death Punch. It's BROJO. Death, like the thing we're all going to die from eventually, and then punch. So, yes, and if you can, follow, subscribe, leave a comment. This week I'm not doing it, but next week I'm going to start going ahead and shouting out to everybody who comments. If you leave a review, screenshot it and share it with me so that way I could be like, yo, rock on, Mo. Fo. Thank you for going ahead. Listen, and thank you if you do any of those things. Like it, subscribe, share it, and listen, stay well, stay healthy, and we'll be back. We'll be back.
We're on the same
When I
side.
woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.